there's so many more women directors. There's so many more women producers and cinematographers, and we're slowly taking over, and it's a beautiful thing. Not that I'm against men or anything.
For me, I'm very interested in the psychology of people, and I like pushing boundaries, and I like exploring philosophy, and so it just seems like that's the only place where you can really go as an independent funded artist and still be able to find an audience that will pay for you to explore that and have that privilege of pushing boundaries and be able to make your next film. I mean, I think a lot of these subjects, if you put them in a drama, probably wouldn't do very well on straight to DVD and wouldn't really interest people. My film deals with incest, but in a very kind of roundabout way, where I don't actually ever, like, you're the only journalist I've ever flat out said to my film is about incest, because I wouldn't ever want to put that out there as the theme. You know, you draw people in to a movie based on other things, but that's what I wanted to explore, was incest. But I didn't want it to be a Lifetime movie that nobody had any interest in seeing.
Brothers and sisters, I toast to Jen.
To Jen.
To Jen.
Oh, God! Most of us are on the same cycle. You will be too.
I love horror. I will definitely continue doing it. I'm in pre-production on my next film, which is also horror. I'm not saying that'll be my only genre, although I'm a big genre mixer. I don't really believe, this is part of the reason why I have a problem with the whole idea of like true horror or some of those other terms that they're trying to use, because I really feel like now, with audiences being so sophisticated and having seen so many stories, that if you don't mix a few genres together, you're boring, because you kind of unconsciously know every genre's markers at this point. You know, I mean, in order to be an action movie, you have to have this happen at the first act break and this happen, and it, you know, I mean, you kind of like start to get the biorhythms as an audience member in your blood, where you're like, oh, okay, I know what's going to happen. And if you don't kind of mix it up and like throw a few different genres in there, I don't know how else you make a story fresh anymore. And so really, when I try to construct a story now, I really think of it from that point of view.
I think what draws me to horror as a genre is that I'm really interested in sort of the dark side of the human condition and the idea of sort of the like vicarious thrill of really intense experience. So I think that the fascination for me is in telling stories that aren't usually told, or that are a little bit taboo, or sort of exploring things that we're not supposed to, as a culture, be that interested in. My film deals with themes about sort of cultural ritual and the horrors that society inflicts on itself and then denies as horror. People interpret it differently, which is interesting, because I think the message is really clear and strong, but a lot of people really don't, and they get a lot of different things, which is a benefit. I am drawn to stories from the point of view of women, but I think that's because I'm a woman and I relate. So I don't know if it's as much an agenda as it is my voice is going to be female because I'm female. I do think that it just wouldn't even occur to me to make a story, to tell a story in which women were sort of non-characters, or were sort of, sub-characters, or sort of stereotypes, because I don't personally see women that way. So, I actually, and I don't think it would go the other way either, but I think it's because we do live in a really strong sort of patriarchal culture, and so I think men are drawn in a three-dimensional fashion in our minds even before we start telling stories. So I think that for me, both genders are completely three-dimensional, and that's the kind of story I would tell. But in terms of messages, I actually think that my voice tends to be about, I have a strong identification with outsiders and with people who see things that other people don't see, like the Cassandra complex kind of thing, where somebody says something and says something and says something and nobody listens, and then it comes to haunt them.
And action! And cut! Beautiful! One of the first rules in screenwriting is write what you know. So I think if my female characters come across as perhaps more three-dimensional, it's because I probably can relate to them more. But no, I don't specifically set out to make the female stronger. I feel like you want all of your characters to be multi-dimensional. So I try to just think about the relationships. And I mean, I guess I don't want a weak female who's with a jerk guy and we're wondering why he's treating her badly or something, but that would be something I would bring in for a male too. I mean, I don't like weak characters, whether they're male or female or somewhere in between. Well, I do sort of make chick flick horror in a way, in that there's usually a female protagonist and there's usually a romantic comedy element, because that's just my background and what I always seem to infuse. Like Teenage Bikini Vampire is pretty girly. I was surprised people thought that was by a guy. And I did a film called Confederate Zombie Massacre, and oddly enough, it's a song and dance romantic musical horror comedy, so there's blood and guts galore, but which threw people off. But ultimately, I think it does really appeal to a female audience. I think the strongest thing that motivates me is I think horror should have well-developed stories and well-developed characters. And I think that tends to appeal to women more stereotypically speaking than men who like action films and whatever. Not to say that all men like those kind of films or that women don't, but I think women can definitely help improve the horror genre just because socially we've been sort of raised to want more development in our storytelling. And what better place to have story development than the horror genre?
Yeah, no, I definitely want to keep going in this genre. I'm probably going to be more in the thriller world, in the psychological aspects of horror, because my next project is called Hysteria, and it is a modern version of Rosemary's Baby. So I think the themes that I'm interested in, that I've also done another feature film that's called Fugue, that's about a woman who moves into a house and starts to perceive supernatural phenomena, then realizes it's kind of all in her head. So I think my themes have become looking at insanity from, like, what does it mean? Like, what is normal versus crazy, or would you call crazy? That's definitely something. And then I'm very interested in sort of escape themes.
Hearing things, footsteps, laughing. I need to know what's going on with me.
You were in a coma for 10 days. When you came back, it was as if the last 9 months had been completely erased. The condition is called a dissociative fugue.
The next time you hear this thing or see it, just tell yourself it's not real, because it's not, no.
It happens that I'm attracted to projects that have females at its center. So I understand the psyche. I understand it very well when you kind of losing control, and so I try to capture that with the camera and the acting, because I love exploring that fear factor for females from a female perspective?
Well, I think a lot of women in the past who have done a couple entries in the horror genre don't want to get pigeonholed in it or don't want to get stuck in it. It's unfortunate that some of the women who have done really good horror films, like Mary Harron, American Psycho, I think is one of the most disturbing films to come out in a long time that deals with really horrific things, but she doesn't want to be a horror director. She wants to be known as a director, and I respect that, but at the same time, like, it's kind of too bad she doesn't, because she would be a great person to really take horror to a whole new level.
As someone who's really interested in the genre, I think that it's clearly that there aren't enough female voices there, and I think that I do think men and women are different, and I think that that's a broad statement because all people are different. And I think that the more voices there are, the more interesting stories there are to tell, and I want to tell stories, and I'm drawn to dark stories, so of course I want to stay in the genre. Of course I want to make horror films. I think it's something I personally want to explore. And I wouldn't do it just as a political agenda or something, or social agenda. I would do it because that's the stuff that I'm interested in. Those are the topics I want to explore. Those are the stories that excite me. So there are others. I mean, there are other things that I'm interested in for sure, but I think horror is something I want to play with for a while, and I don't feel intimidated or alienated. I just feel like we're woefully underrepresented and not given the level of status that it just seems logical like should be there. So it would only even it out to have more women's voices.